Hey YouTube, Joyboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1084 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Oh my god, this chapter was incredibly immense flames. I am losing my freaking mind. That is basically how I feel. But yeah, fair warning at the start of this chapter reaction. A large chunk of this chapter reaction is purely theory speculation, okay? I'm basically going to speculate all of One Piece, some of which I've already done in the past, but this chapter in context with what we know is what I want to discuss. If you're gonna get pissed off because we wait until the end to discuss some elements of the chapter and a lot of it is a continuous rabbit hole train of theory, okay, you are warned. The theory, of course, is incredibly fire and the discussion is why I live, but if that's not you, okay, you do you. Without further ado, probably a lot of you guys aren't going to know this, but probably one of the first things that I latched onto as like a thing to discuss within One Piece communities when I finally just started not just reading what people were writing, but actually writing stuff myself, a lot of it was about Alabasta Kingdom and the Nefertari family. Again, this was like 10, 12 years ago, but it was a really contentious thing as to if the Nefertari family was like loyal to the celestial dragons and the world government, or in some way betrayed them. In some ways, it was like the epic theory nerds version of Sanji versus Zoro. That's how I felt at the very least. This was a conversation because they had a poneglyph. Cobra led Robin to it within their basement, and it was not entirely clear why that was there. This is additive with the fact that Crocodile assumed that the ancient weapon Pluton was located somewhere in Alabasta. I guess we now know that this is not true, and it was simply confirmed that the poneglyph in Alabasta indicated the location of the ancient weapon Pluton, so it probably mentioned Wano. But there was a heavy association between the ancient weapons in Alabasta, and this is something that I think that you forget after over 1,000 chapters of One Piece, but like the ancient weapons, what they were, their connection to things, all of this was a very ambiguous thing for a very long time. So a lot of this information just wasn't quite enough. And I think it really started to click for a lot of people, at least for me, about Fishman Island. If you guys recall, the Shandians or the Shandorans who also possessed a poneglyph claimed to be protecting it. Certainly it was in a protected location. The same sort of vibe impression was given to us about the poneglyph in Fishman Island being hidden. And that's precisely what Cobra said about the poneglyph in Alabasta. And it was really interesting when he brought it up because Robin looked at him funny and was like, nah, no way are you protecting this. You are a member of the government. Don't lie to me. That's not a verbatim quote, but it was something to that effect. It was actually a moment of drama as Cobra is taking Robin down the stairs. He says that he and his family have been tasked with guarding it for generations, and she says no way. So I begin to think to myself, what if it's true? Certainly now, since this point, more information has been revealed where it's like, look, every single one of these poneglyphs, the same directive has been given. Whoever, the civilization which possesses them, it's like a task passed down from generation to keep it secret. And the fact that Cobra is saying that his family is doing the same thing it says something. It seems unlikely to be a lie or that they stole it to in some way use it like a lot of people argued 12 years ago. But it was around the beginning of Dressrosa which dropped a very crucial bit of information which has pretty much bolstered any sort of Nefertari headcanon I think that I or anyone could have from that point forward. The reveal was that the Nefertari family is a celestial dragon family, and unlike the other 19 kings of the 20 kings which formed the world government, they did not choose to go live in Marijois. And so I pretty much ran with this information, including the conversation that Cobra had with Robin about protecting the poneglyph. Soon after, we got things like so as well. It all sort of added up that, the Nefertari family must have betrayed the 20 kingdoms and were in fact allied with the ancient kingdom and Joyboy. They're protecting a poneglyph like all of his allies. So like I said guys, this speculation, this concept was a huge component of what actually got me into the One Piece community. And man, it's been a really long time, but we're finally, I think, getting real answers. So I want you guys to strap yourselves in, alright? We're gonna speculate. We're gonna speculate a lot of things. We're gonna try to bring it all together and make sense of what we're getting right now. Always keep in mind that these are just theories, these are my conclusions. It doesn't have to be true, we could still be missing things, I could just be totally wrong. but I'm so excited to talk about this chapter because it's truly, from a speculation standpoint, absolutely freaking game-changing. So, there's going to be a lot of different theories we're going to bring together. Let's try to do this in a way that makes sense. First off, I think that it is incredibly likely, or at the very least possible, that Nefertari Lily is Imu. You can manipulate this idea based on what makes sense to you, what you like for yourself, but here's what we know. We know that there are 19 swords that surround the empty throne. 19 of the 20 original kings, because one was not there. That was the Nefertari family. The Nefertari family, we're told, went back home to Alabasta, but the actual queen of the Nefertari, Lily herself, never actually made it back. This is purely a question out into the vacuum, you decide for yourself, but how likely do you think that it is, after founding the world government, that the Nefertari family, the queen of the Nefertari family, disappears on the journey home? Let's just analyze this, okay? After the fighting is over, the world government has presumably won, and the Nefertari family, they gave up their power, so they're no longer competing with the other celestial dragons. They're bowing out. Everyone else is more powerful because of them. How likely is it that she is assassinated in the short time span from there to home? But there's a smoking gun here, and that's the fact that nobody knows this information. It was covered up. Either her murder or her disappearance never became news. They in fact fabricated an entire story around it for reasons that are not apparent. Cobra had to logic it from the fact that Lily was one of the 20 kings, but then from the moment that Alabasta became a country, suddenly her brother is in power. Why was this worth covering up? Well, let's go back to present day. Right now, the way that the world government operates is a farce. It is a lie. The Gorosei are celestial dragons, and they are subservient to Imu, who is the king who sits upon the throne. It sure as hell ain't empty, right? Imu easily sits upon it like it's no big deal. We don't know the timeline, right? Did Imu come into power sometime during the last 800 years? It's totally possible. Or if it wasn't Imu, maybe that there's just a succession of true kings that exist. But how did this system get implemented? When did it start? This chapter makes me want to believe that it started from the very beginning. At no point was the throne ever empty. The other 19 kings made a show of claiming this, while spreading the false information that the Nefertari family had rejected an invitation to marry Joie and were going back home. The queen disappears along the route, and the secret is created. 20 kings, but not all are equal. Nefertari Lily became Imu, and the Imu that we see today, I believe, is the very same person using the power of devil fruits. We speculated before the past history of the Opi no Mi. Why the government put such a high price on it is that devil fruit has been used, specifically the element of it that can make someone perpetually youthful. The simple fact is that Imu's connection with Vivi is something that has not been explained, and is quite honestly difficult to explain. A lot of people pondered this question over the last since the Reverie, right? Imu held Vivi's wanted poster. What did that mean? Why was she put on the same level as the ancient weapon Poseidon, Shirahoshi, Blackbeard, and Luffy? One of these does not fit, right? And so people went so far as to speculate that Vivi could be an ancient weapon herself. I never liked that theory. I just never did. I never thought that there was appropriate setup for her having some sort of secret ability. It didn't seem obvious to me. So this connection of a family relation between Imu and Vivi, essentially, right? Imu, if she is Queen Lily from the past, Vivi is probably very similar to her. Oda does this time and again. I might bring this up at some other point in the review as well. Parallels, okay? Cyclical time, inherited will, and let's face it, plain old genetics. Suddenly, Vivi makes sense. Imu is looking at a younger version of herself. Then you get to the name itself, Imu. Imu spelled backwards is Umi. Umi in Japanese means sea. Mother Sea is the common speculation. A lot of people already believe that Imu is a woman just simply by the design. And when we see her during the Reverie, she demonstrates gentle attributes, which you could associate as feminine or motherly. It's a fun fact someone passed along to me as well, that monarch butterflies, or butterflies in general, are very attracted to the scent of the lily. Lily the flower. But if this isn't your connection between Limu and Vivi, it's got to be something else. Again, I told you I don't like the ancient weapon. Vivi is an ancient weapon theories. So what are some other ways that you could potentially connect this? Is Limu not Lily, but may have known Lily during the Void Century, a spurned lover or a friend, something to that effect, maybe? But with these lists of feminine attributes, I do tend to believe that Limu is a woman. And in the spurned lover speculation, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, I don't believe that Oda is going to turn his in-game world government villain into a sort of Sanji-like lustful, some sort of Sword Art Online Season 2 shenanigans. I really hope not, at the very least. I don't want any sort of sexual connotations or like, oh, you remind me of Lily, who I was in love with during the Void Century, go become my wife. That's not personally what I'm rooting for. We'll leave it there. So I hope at this stage you're at least open-minded to the possibility that Lily is Limu and has survived since the Void Century. It could be many different permutations different to this. It could be totally wrong, but there's at least a very justifiable argument. Alright, now this chapter provides us with another very justifiable argument that seems incredibly contradictory, and that is the Nefertari family is a family of D. If you want to believe the Limu theory, Lily Limu, then how do you make sense of Alabasta containing a poneglyph, protecting a poneglyph, which is so very obviously what they are doing? Not only are they protecting a poneglyph, but they have a surviving note from Lily herself, which mentions the family D. The family D, which are closely associated with the poneglyphs, and it is incredibly likely that once you put all the poneglyphs together, you will know what D, the will of D is, what that means, and who carries the initials and why. So let's parse through about 10 years of One Piece theory community evolution, of which I was a pretty substantial part of, and just get to the conclusion here, pretty accepted at this point in time, that those who carried the initial D were allies of Joyboy. I'm particularly partial to the ideas that D is equal to dream or dreams, or D is the half of the smiley face. I like those theories. You can believe whatever the heck you want to. But the way that we've argued it for years upon years is that this is a hidden initial, it's secret, and it ties together all of the descendants of the ancient kingdom, of which Joyboy was king. There are of course many families which have forgotten that the initial is supposed to be secret. Luffy, the Monkey D family being like prime among those, but since it's been confirmed through law that it's a hidden initial, pretty much anybody can technically be a D. For one reason or another, they could have the initial and just know not to share it, or they could have the initial but just simply the presence of it has been forgotten. So the theory is that everybody who is protecting a poneglyph is in fact a D. And because I already believed the Nefertari family were protecting a poneglyph, I already believed them to be a D before this chapter even began. But the main thing that we should be questioning right now is why now? For Cobra. Cobra's asking questions that I'm sure that he knows is dangerous. He might in fact not be asking these at all if his health was not already in a poor state. But what these questions are and how he came to them is something I can't fully explain to you. We will find out the technicalities of it, but is worth thought. The first question which intrigues him is what happened to Lily, and he went straight to the Gorosei for the answer. Her disappearance seems to have struck a lot of curiosity within him, and for some reason he believes that the government will be able to tell him. I think that the reason that he thinks this is because he believes that the truth has been covered up in much the same way that he knows or understands the government is capable of, which he would have first-hand experience dealing with what happened with his country and the news of Crocodile, for which Luffy did not get credit. The other half of this is that his country contains a poneglyph which he seems to know to some extent contains information that is lost to history, and Lily has been lost to history in the very same way. To me, following Cobra's story, it just makes sense that when the events in Alabasta happened, he began to research why exactly his country even had a poneglyph to begin with, and why they were supposed to protect it given it's hinted pretty heavily to be associated with an ancient weapon. This rabbit hole led him to the mystery of Lily, and from all of it, all he could discover was one note. So I want to throw in a thought here, which is that all traces of Lily has seemingly disappeared. All mention of her, in fact, within her country has been erased. And I think that, while it's easy to think that there might be some sort of devil fruit power that's doing this, I hope that her brother, who gained power after her disappearance, would essentially know that knowledge of her would not be passed down. So in some ways, this cleansing occurred with his knowledge and permission. I think that this is somewhat confirmed by the note. The king allowed all mention of Lily to be destroyed except for the one which he personally kept secret. And over 800 years, this has never been a thing that seems contentious at all, has never tried to reveal Lily's existence to his own people or even his own family. Again, aside from the note. You can possibly speculate that Lily's brother was an antagonist, that he was evil and wanted power for himself. There was some sort of assassination of the queen, and afterwards pretty much let it happen and enjoyed the spoils. But I am not too sure that makes a lot of sense, having kept the note. We've already speculated Limu. I personally believe that the brother knew what happened to Lily, to some extent. Maybe not the full truth, maybe not Imu, but knew something. And I think basically what occurred is that Lily said goodbye. As a side note, this is an incredible foil parallel to Vivi and Alabasta when she also said goodbye, but in a different way. And we'll get back to these comparisons sometime later. But Lily directly said goodbye to her brother, and she herself ordered the cleansing of her own records, except for the note. So what did the note actually say? Why was it important to erase everything except for this? Guys, this is going to sound really crazy probably in the short term. We're going to continue on after this, and I hope at some point it makes more sense. But Cobra first asked about Lily and didn't receive an answer and didn't seem surprised about that. And immediately he turned heel and asked the second question, which was very interesting to him. What is the meaning of D? We only know of one other thing within the Nefertari family that was passed down over time. That was a command. That command was to protect the poneglyphs. I believe Lily's note is that note stating that command. And I think that within it, she reveals that the Nefertari are D. Hence the question. Guys, everything else can be erased except for this. This is not only true for the Nefertari family, this is true if you look at, for instance, the Shandians. The Shandians know nothing about the Void Century, nothing of the true history. It is all gone. The only thing which remains from the Void Century in terms of families related to the Ancient Kingdom is you need to protect the poneglyphs and you are D. That is it. These two things might as well be the same as the X which secretly bonded Vivi to the Strats at the end of Alabasta. But I'm sure that many of you have arrived at a potential problem. Most people, I assume, right? Like, we've speculated that Imu is Lily, Limu, and we've speculated that Lily is a D and a friend of Joyboy. So these two things, for most people, no, it doesn't work. But for me, it explains all of One Piece, where we've been, and where we're going. And if you're patient, maybe I can persuade you. As a side note, I have talked about some of these concepts before. I'll be reiterating to some extent. I made a Ragnarok video a few months ago. Feel free to check that out, right? We're gonna lean on that because I'm not really speculating something different. We're just adding more pieces to the puzzle. So let's begin with the empty throne, right? This is something that was highlighted in this chapter. We already knew this, but the empty throne is spiritually empty. And all of these celestial dragons who form the world government symbolically stab swords around the chair to demonstrate how they've abdicated power, such that all of them are equal. We know that is, of course, a lie. Imu sits upon the throne, and the Gorosei and the celestial dragons seem pretty aware of it. But the fact that they outwardly do this is a question. There is a reason that 800 years ago, this symbolism was powerful to the people of the world. They wanted to project this to their subordinates. I think that at the very least, this gives you some insight into the Void Century. The fact that during the Void Century, at some point in time, there was a one king. When the world government was founded, one of the very first things that the Celestial Dragons did is they promised to the world that no one else would sit on this throne. Likely because whoever did abused that power, or was otherwise hated and feared. Like, I just want to make sure you guys are following me here, but this abdicating power isn't for the Celestial Dragons, right? Because we're presuming that this is Limu has existed from the very beginning, so at no point in time did they themselves fear a true king. This is purely for optics. This is for the ignorant people. Otherwise, Limu would simply be acknowledged as the king of the world. There would be no need to hide it. This is incredibly likely to be what the people actually wanted. They did not want one king. Something from the Void Century taught them that this was not good. So let's segue into present day. The lore of the king of the world is something that has been passed down or exists today. This is stated to have been Rock's dream, and I presume that it is Blackbeard's dream. To be honest with you guys, it was only until recently that I started to believe that this was where the entire story was going all along. Luffy tells Rayleigh that he doesn't want to conquer anything. Being the Pirate King just means being the most free. And to this comment, Rayleigh grants. I believe that we're going to see the world government fall, the celestial dragons brought to their knees, and the pirates will ultimately win. And so the Pirate King will become the king of the world. The question is what kind of king is this going to be? And the answer is, it depends on the pirate, because Oda has made them diametric. We learned in recent chapters that there were gods before the celestial dragons. These were Lunarians, but their story is unclear. Bearing in mind that the Void Century was for 100 years, my personal belief is that it was kicked off, it began with the defeat of the gods at their time, the Lunarians. And for 100 years, the Void Century, the world was ruled by pirates. Because the only person capable of becoming the king of the world is a pirate. I think that we see this echoed in the present storyline, right? Pirates are just built different, straight up. The strongest people that exist, period, outside of science is pirates, the Yonko. I'll throw a bone maybe to Dragon, maybe a Kainu, but if you add up the strongest top tiers in the world in vast quantities, they're pirates, and we know pretty much pirates are going to win because of Luffy. I think that Oda interrelates this with dreams, desires, and ambitions. Essentially, the pirates are the greediest, most ambitious people on the planet that attempt to do the impossible, and most often they fail, but when they succeed, you've known they've done something incredible. Often something that nobody else has ever done. Nobody else would ever dare to do. And in the process, they've grown substantially. This is what separates them. So I feel like I've rationally argued that it's likely during the Void Century there was a one true king that the world feared. The new system which replaced it made sure to communicate, hey look, the king of the world is gone. That system is no more. We won't let that happen again. I think that the king of the world is most likely to be, based on the breadth of the story, most likely to have been a pirate. And of course that makes sense, because that is exactly what Rocks was going for. It's probably what Blackbeard is going for. It's essentially what we're fighting against. What is the meaning of freedom? I've made this argument in the past. Some people really don't like it when I bring this up, but to me this is just straight up facts. Who would you rather have in control of the world? Would you rather have the government, as it has been corrupt and wrong in so many ways, or would you rather have Kaido? Because no matter how bad the government is, what Kaido did to Wano was worse. There isn't exact numbers, but you could approximate more than 50% of the entire population of Wano is dead. Now apply that to the world. In a perfect world, we don't want to be arguing about the lesser of two evils or the greater good. I'm just saying, if you compare the two, right, the answer is very apparent. So how does this relate with the subject matter of the chapter, the reveal of Lily, Vivi, and the Nefertari family? What about this chapter has intertwines with where I'm going? So let's restate this. We have this concept that Lily may be Emo. We also have a reasonable speculation that the Nefertari family and Lily may be a D. How can both of these things be true? So let's take the next step. Lily was a pirate, and she became the king of the pirates, or the king of the world. As we said sometime earlier in this video, genetics is a real thing in One Piece, and it can be kind of convoluted, complex, and you can't derive definitive conclusions always, but in general, I think that children inherit the properties of their parents or one parent often. This is something that Oda is very consistent with. We all began this story thinking that Luffy was a nobody from nowhere who, using the power of will, is going to surpass all odds and save the world. And the people that thought that this was the direction One Piece was heading in got proved demonstrably wrong, because Luffy is from high tier blood, straight up. I mean, he is directly related to two of the most powerful people that currently exist in Dragon and Garp, and that is a big component of why Luffy is so strong himself. And even personality-wise, I think that you can derive similarities, certainly with Garp, and probably with Dragon as well. They're not the same, but certainly those similarities exist. This is across the board. Anywhere that you look, even with someone like Sanji. Is Sanji like Judge Finsmoke? Not really, but he is very similar to his mother. This isn't 100% true all the time. You can look at Sabo as a counterexample, but it is true, I mean, when we have examples, 99% of the time. A general rule that I'm going to apply to Lily right now, and again, it may be wrong, but a general rule is that she is probably like Vivi. If you take the Limu theory and run with it, as Imu is looking at the bounty poster of Vivi, I wonder whether she's looking at it and thinking, wow, this girl is a lot like I was when I was that age. But the thing that I want to focus on is that Vivi is interesting because she is a monarch of her country who truly desires actually to be a pirate and go on adventures. And she was very close to shirking her responsibilities and duties to her own country in pursuit of this driving force. As she said goodbye to the Strides in Alabasta, it's very clear where her heart was. So a pirate ancestor makes a lot of sense. So the next question is how is Lily associated with the family D and the poneglyphs? And my speculation here is that she had a relationship with Joyboy, very similar to Vivi's relationship with Straw Hat Luffy. Guys, a lot of the rationale for this theory comes from my Ragnarok video, in which Oda is heavily inspired by Viking cultures, was big. One of the first things that he fell in love with as a child. The mythology is a huge source of inspiration across the board, but specifically within One Piece. And the idea is that Ragnarok encapsulates the final battle of One Piece. Ragnarok was this heavily prophesized thing, this final battle that the gods knew was going to happen. The gods faced this battle head-on, knowing that they would lose, and then they did lose to Chaos. In this case, Chaos represents pirates. Afterwards, the world was thrust into a void and disappeared. Everything is gone. Nobody knows what happens until the world is reborn, slightly better than it was before. So again, the gods are order, and the pirates are chaos. The chaos will eventually win. It has been foretold. You can think of it like when the celestial dragons fall, the Void Century will begin. Because while the gods are not perfect, they are holding at bay this force which is far more destructive, but also necessary for growth. And the other concept which is heavily involved in all of this is cyclical history. Events repeat themselves. So the speculation that I made from that video, which I still like a lot right now, is that Joyboy from the Void Century never was defeated. We like to think about the Void Century and the Ancient Kingdom versus the 20 Kings, and the 20 Kings who became the world government, they defeated Joyboy, and Joyboy had to write all of his history and ideals on poneglyphs, right? Joyboy didn't lose. In the very same way that the Roger Pirates never lost, I believe that Joyboy turned himself in. Guys, I believe this with all of my heart, and I'll be curious how Oda works around this and potentially addresses it if it's not the case. But as we've argued before, and I know people don't like it, the pirates are definitively worse than the government. And it's not because all pirates are bad, but the amount of chaos and destruction that they bring with them is just on another scale entirely. We said that it almost has to be true that before the world government was created, the people of the world feared the one true king. This is entirely the reason why the throne is empty. They would have had to fear it based on experience. And I think that this was the experience of the Void Century when the world was ruled by pirates. When the king of the pirates was also the king of the world. Thus, the schism that Oda has cultivated between Luffy and Rocks. Both are aiming for the same goal, but it means drastically different things. Whether the king was Joyboy or the king was somebody like Blackbeard, it really doesn't matter. The point is that you need some structure. Maybe you can call it a balance of powers. Imagine Joyboy as the king of the pirates for however long. Maybe he was a giant and it was for all 100 years. Maybe it was only for a part of those years. Regardless, Joyboy, if he is anything like Luffy, made a lot of friends. Friends that spanned across the world. And again, if he's anything like Luffy, his primary concern is defending his friends, protecting them, allowing them to achieve their dreams. That is what Luffy does. He fights for freedom. Joyboy may have been, I think it's probable that he was the strongest pirate of his day. Future Luffy, right? Totally invincible. Everyone knew that if you fought him, you would lose and you would die. But so here's the thing, and this is set up excruciatingly well in all of One Piece. Just the same, that wouldn't stop people from trying. Pirates set out to do the impossible because a man's dream never ends. It doesn't die. True pirates in the world of One Piece pursue their dreams no matter what they are and accept the consequences. So despite Joyboy being the strongest person alive maybe and no threat of anyone ever defeating him, the world he presides over is still utter chaos. Maybe a good parallel right now from recently in the story is the interaction between Eustace Kid and Shanks. Shanks is kind of like your Joyboy figure, totally on another level entirely, certainly of Kid, but that didn't stop Kid from fighting him more than once, or Bartolomeo pissing on the flag. The threat of certain death does not stop these characters from pursuing their dreams. And just the same, Shanks can't be everywhere at once. The larger your crew grows, the larger number of Nakama that you have, the harder it is to protect them all. So the long story short here, guys, is that no matter if it was a good pirate or a bad pirate who became king of the world, I think that a world run by pirates is a worse place. But it's prudent to compare the two, right? A world that is ruled by Luffy is the strongest, is much preferred than a world ruled by Kaido as the strongest, right? And that's the fear. That one day, no matter how long it takes, a pirate like that seizes control. I think that, again, comparing Joyboy and Luffy, if Luffy survives to old age, fighting battles throughout his entire life, eventually he's going to ask himself a question of what happens when I'm gone. So this was an absolutely magnificent dovetail out into the abyss, as we are not talking about the chapter at all, and we still have not talked about the chapter. But I do want to get back to Lily, because this is the theory, essentially, is that Joyboy got old and was close to dying, and needed a successor, and didn't want the world to the next king to take over the world, and for the cycle to continue, because he's Joyboy, he's Luffy, and he wants to protect his friends and has been unable to do so, despite having everything the world had to offer. This freedom-loving man had a problem, and that many people abuse that freedom. So a plan was conceived. Joyboy figured that if he was defeated by another pirate, then that pirate would become the new king of the pirates, and he didn't want that to be a certain kind of pirate. He wanted it to be a pirate like himself. So he chose his own successor, Lily of Alabasta. Guys, the government was his answer. Joyboy created the world government. And with it, the world was ushered into a new era of relative peace. Perhaps you can call it a peace and not the one piece. Using the vast amount of power that Joyboy had acquired over the duration of the Void Century, he and his friends created the Grand Line. It is a giant Davy-back arena, the greatest adventure the world has ever seen. It is very possible that in his last years, the world came to fear Joyboy because of what he was doing to the world. But there was a purpose, because just the same as Roger in his final moments, this acted as a spark, a flame, to lure every pirate in the world to the Grand Line and search for the Pirate King's treasure and the supposedly unconquerable adventure. And just like that, peace was created in the Four Blues, because the greatest, most fearsome pirates were no longer there. Joyboy then staged his own revolution. 20 kings from this newly formed Grand Line, this dangerous place, were mad. They rebelled and quote-unquote defeated Joyboy. I believe this was probably immediately after Joyboy defeated the greatest enemy he had seen during his lifetime. A fight that very nearly destroyed the entire world. Those that were claimed to be responsible for defeating Joyboy were considered heroes, and nations rushed to join their alliance. With the exception of many nations within the Four Blues, which had already experienced a few years, maybe decades of peace. The 20 kings who won, their first promise to the world is that there would never be a king again, and their second promise was to create a force that would make sure that no pirate would ever see the light of day again. They created the Marines. I think that many of Joyboy's own friends, former pirates, became your first Marine admirals, your Monkey D. Garbs. But they were simply doing what they had always done, fought pirates. Oda established this at the very beginning of One Piece in the one-shot variations. There's two kind of pirates, Peace Mains and Morganeers, and the Peace Mains are pirates who fight other pirates. And the one-shot, coincidence or not, Garp was a pirate and not a Marine admiral, but based on this theory, there's really not too much difference. The Grand Line made it very easy to watch the world of pirates, and the government's task is to either defeat the pirates or balance the powers. Ensure that a new king does not arise until the time is right, because there's some prophecy or some knowledge that Joyboy would return, and that with his coming the world would change once again, and perhaps a better answer is found. Because what we have here is certainly not ideal, and I think that this is illustrated through characters like Laboon, right? If Joyboy was the one to create the Grand Line, Laboon bashing his head against it shows it's not natural, it's not right. There's something is missing. But the last most important thing that the world government did, almost as soon as they came to power, is they erased all knowledge that a pirate was ever king, in the hopes to suppress the dream for as long as possible. Pirates who sought to become king of the world instead were given a different dream, which is to find the One Piece. So all history of the Void Century was erased, and it became part of the intrigue of the treasure. Guys, you'll notice here, this explains why the world government has not confiscated all the poneglyphs. This explains why the allies of Joyboy are still alive today. And this explains the initial of D. The purpose that it holds to remind people of the past, or remind people of a past that cannot be expressed. I like to believe that Joyboy did not want his brothers and sisters to forget that they were family, even though they were not actually related. I think I mentioned this sometime earlier in the review, but the X in Alabasta, it is the very same thing. You can say X marks the spot. It is the same concept. A silent symbol. And as I said, I think that Lily was very similar to Vivi, and Joyboy chose her to watch over the world because Lily was the perfect candidate to do so. The ideal king. Reasonable, rational, compassionate, kind, and fierce. One of the greatest people that he knew, who understood both the world of ruling and the world of pirates. The hat that we see in Mary Joie is in fact Joyboy's hat, and it's not a trophy of war. It was the treasure of her friend. Joyboy passed it on to her. And I'm sure that some of you guys right now are just itching, like, JB, are you ever going to address the fact that Emu and the government today is evil, and celestial dragons are evil, and this does not compute? And I'm just telling you guys, there's a very reasonable argument for everything as it exists today. And the simple premise that you've kind of got to operate by is that the world government has not always been how they are now. They have corrupted over time. As they say, power corrupts, right? But even now, I mean, in any facet of One Piece, if you think that any group or any individual is just pure evil, you haven't been paying attention. And I would wager pretty heavily that if Lily is still alive and is Emu and has lived 800 years, time has not been good for her. This is a pretty commonly expressed idea. I'm not sure how to necessarily define it in a way that you could just know, but if you ever read something like the Stormlight Archive, it's the very same story beat, which is that the gods fight endlessly, and they start off as very righteous and the greatest of all mankind, the greatest kings, chosen to protect the world, and given enough time, they all break. Because a person can only take so much pain and loss before they lose their will to continue fighting. I think that Emu has largely, for the last several hundred years, lost the will to fight. because being involved in caring too much is too painful. But despite that, she has managed to keep her promise, which is to protect the world government until the day that Joyboy appears. So Limu appears when the government itself is threatened, which is precisely what the Revolutionary Army is trying to do. Guys, you can consider the world government to be evil to your heart's content, and certainly there are bad actors within it, but from everything that we've seen from the Gorosei themselves, context and such, they clearly want good things to happen. When the destruction of Ohara was ordered, they were frustrated and sad. When they're talking about the fishmen, right? It appeared that they wanted the fishmen to join the Reverie, and they saw Jinbei as a tool to foster peace between species. They want peace, but it tends to be easier said than done. Celestial dragons like St. Charlos are accepted, in part because the greater fear here is fracturing from within. When Joyboy and Lily initially designed the world government, they never thought that their friends, these great kings at the time, would become something like that. So to go full tinfoil here, and fill in some gaps if you need it, this is, again, pure speculation, but I think the humans came from the moons. The moon has less gravity, therefore the people that live there are less strong. The moons were harmed, and the humans gradually migrated to the surface of the blue planet, where the Lunarians were gods, and the non-human tribes were the strongest races. We're talking about giants, we're talking about fishmen. And this period was marked by rule by individual strength. The non-human tribes were simply stronger than humans, and they looked down on them. The theory is that before the Void Century, humans were oppressed. And it was a fight for their rights which perhaps sparked the Void Century to begin with, just as the Lunarians fell at the hands of Agents of Chaos pirates. That's what your Joyboy figure was fighting for before the Void Century began. And in this case, I find it fitting that at the time, that Joyboy could have been a giant. So essentially what I'm trying to do here is transpose the story of the fishmen as we see it in the present timeline to humans before the Void Century. So the same sort of conflicts, emotions, everything like that applied. So the Lunarians were brought to their knees and defeated, the humans rose up, but the grudges were not lost. Which is another concept that One Piece dives into, as Princess Otohime tells us, or Queen Otohime tells us, leave the children out of it. Don't let them inherit your anger. But clearly it is a fear. So the idea is that the current racism against non-human tribes, highlighted specifically with fishmen, is a relic of the past. Again, put yourself in the minds of the fishmen right now. I think it's very reasonable to believe that something worse is probably going to happen to them before the end of the story. And it could reach a point to where the celestial dragons and the human scribes are unforgivable. You want them to be forgiven, but you understand if they're not. The solution is complicated to the point of absurdity. Their anger is justified. As stated before, I personally believe that Joyboy was a giant. Giants live for 300 years, so the Void Century could span Joyboy's entire lifetime. I think that the Void Century began when the Lunarians were defeated. I think Joyboy was a part of this. And through this, afterwards, right, the mission changed. Because he made friends with all of the non-humans as well. So the conflict was sparked because he wanted to fight for the rights of humans. The humans then got power and lashed out in anger against those that had oppressed them. And Joyboy was caught in the middle, trying to find a solution, which he never did. Hence the poneglyph of apology left in Fishman Island. His unsatisfying solution was for the non-human groups, the minks, the dwarves, the fishmen, to go into hiding in order to prevent more conflict. Because there was no right or wrong to the fight. Only death and the inherited will to pursue it. Anyway guys, this was obviously long-winded and not directly related to the chapter, but with the connections between Alabasta, Lily, and Limu and the government, these are my thoughts. And I wanted to give you full context of my headcanon for how the story goes and why this fits beautifully to the direction that I've seen it over the last couple years. This doesn't make it true, but I think it's pretty remarkable that, guys, honestly, I could debate you all day this is a pretty airtight theory, but you always have to keep in mind that new details can change things entirely, turn things on their head. Just because it makes sense now and you can make arguments for everything right now does not make it truth. But you know I love my headcanon, especially when it's very justifiable. I really hope that this flashback continues in the next chapter, although it's not guaranteed. We could be hanging on this for a while, so we might find out very quickly that I'm totally wrong and Imu reveals themselves to be, as soon as they reveal themselves to be someone other than Lily, right, the theory probably isn't correct. But, we'll see. Being wrong has never deterred me. We of the Joyboy crew face certain death with smiles on our faces. But I want to make sure that I discuss this in more broad terms and less specifically down the rabbit hole that I personally believe. And I guess the main thing that you absolutely need to be doing is you need to question the relationship between Imu and the Nefertari family and Lily of the past. That is integral, I believe, to understanding all of this. What we know absolutely for sure is that the name Lily seems to be important to Imu. It's delivered in this chapter in a way that suggests that Imu actually might know who Lily was during her lifetime. So the community belief that Imu is actually from the Void Century is highly substantiated in this chapter. And we at least have a clue which resolves the lingering mystery of why Imu has targeted Vivi as a person of interest. If you think about it for a second that Imu is potentially from the Void Century, then there's no doubt that this person actually knew Lily. Even if it's not Lily, just because Lily was one of the 20 founders of the world government. Again, if they are not Lily, one way that this connection could also make sense is they hold some sort of grudge for the fact that Lily never came to live in Revujo. Perhaps it was a betrayal, but hopefully not a lover's quarrel. So now let's put aside this agenda and this mystery and talk about the rest of the chapter. We begin with Sabo attacking various guards, and he runs into Joyboy. Joyboy explains who she is, and this is some connection forms here. I'm curious as to where we go from here. But the main nugget actually comes from the guards who express their frustration that there's just not enough manpower. They don't have enough people. And the reason for this, also explained by the guards, is that employees disappear when they see the Phantom Room. Now, the Phantom Room is this mysterious thing. I think that it's probably where we saw Imu at the very beginning of the Reverie with the tree and the butterfly. That's what I think. It could be something different. There's some secret probably that exists within the Phantom Room, and it may not just be Imu herself. As a side note, I don't think we ever actually updated this theory, but Doflamingo and Dressrosa talked about the national treasure of Revujo. Lots of speculation as to what this was, but it seems like the story is trending in the direction that the national treasure is probably Imu herself. Now that Imu is sort of a known quantity, perhaps, guards even encounter her from time to time and then disappear, it would make sense that the celestial dragons are generally aware that the throne is not empty. Doflamingo, as a former celestial dragon, knowing this would then make a ton of sense. But yeah, I think that the exact language Doflamingo used works for Imu. He said that within Revujo there is a national treasure. Knowledge of this treasure would shake the world. Knowledge of Imu would definitely shake the world. He said that if he had the powers of the Opi no Mi, he could use the treasure, which may in fact be the position of king of the world that Imu currently possesses, to rule the world, right? So essentially, this would connect Imu with the immortality surgery of the Opi no Mi, thereby Imu is immortal, and could be Lily. The thought process here that I have for Doflamingo is that without the Opi no Mi, Imu will eventually die. She may be close to dying anyway, so if he obtains the Opi no Mi and keeps it from her, she will die, they will need a new king, and Doflamingo could make himself that king with the fruit. The other part of this chapter centered around St. Charlos as well as Shirahoshi. And if you guys actually recall, before the Reverie even began, this is what I was speculating, was that something bad would happen to the Fishman and to Shirahoshi by attending the Reverie. There were signs, warning signs of this, and Oda subverted this masterfully. He addressed it, right? It was a thing that actually occurred, but it didn't end up being as big of a deal as I thought that it would be. But I definitely don't think that you should give up on the idea that something terrible happens to the Fishman and happens to Shirahoshi before the end of the story. There are still Chekhov's guns there, with Caribou knowing that Shirahoshi is Poseidon. She is an ancient weapon. It is a coveted dangerous power. This knowledge will spread. It will become relevant in some way. And what we see here with the fishmen, their desire to leave all the humans behind and screw the surface, right? That is going to be brought up again before we end count on it. And the theories that we've discussed for a long time now is that we may get to a point where the fishmen lose their desire to try and live up in the surface. The atrocities are too much. They've tried so hard to play it fair, play it by the rules, play it with integrity, and they've been spurned at every turn. It's finally too much, and the hope that we feel right now, in large part due to the actions of Queen Orihime, may be lost for resolution between the two races. It may become, at least from a story standpoint, seemingly unsalvageable. So another long-standing speculation that I've had is that we know that Luffy is supposed to destroy Fishman Island. I think that he may actually do that, and the reason is that the fishmen no longer want to live on the surface. Integration is a kind of interesting concept that Oda uses. People live together, they party, you know, and this forms bonds. But as they are separated, certainly they're not fighting each other, so no atrocities are committed, but no bonds are formed either. So in game, the fishmen need to come and live with the people so that the people can say, look, these aren't nasty alien fish people, you know, they're just like us, they just look a little different. So if they self-isolate and refuse to join, Luffy may just destroy all of Fishman Island and say, look, you have a choice, die or try. Which would be a very selfish decision on Luffy's part, but at the same time he states this pretty clearly, look, he is no hero, okay? He does not share his meat. And then we get some beautiful storytelling. I just want you guys to know, right, for all of you who think that there's some sort of great true evil in the world, everyone is a shade of gray. Every faction is a shade of gray, and Oda highlights this with St. Charlos versus St. Mosgard. I was honestly shocked with the twist that the person that was going to shoot Queen Orihime, that celestial dragon, ends up being Mosgard. His life completely changed, but that is exactly what happens, and he represents something. There is good and bad everywhere, both for the people that we are fighting for and those that we are fighting against. Even with a character such as Blackbeard, I almost guarantee you that Blackbeard will have some justifiable rationale for whatever atrocity that he sets out for at the end of the story. And as I believe this of Blackbeard, I believe the same is probably going to be true of Imu. There are layers. It's complex. And Oda highlights this in one specific way when discussing pirates, right? When we see the good side of pirates in this chapter. Nobody can fight against these celestial dragons, not even Mosgard, not really, right? But who is the one force that is tasked with this responsibility of checking the gods? Their natural enemies. It's the free pirates. We kind of skipped over this in the long rant, right? But obligatory plug in here that the family D and the ancient kingdom was a kingdom of pirates. We are seeing the legend of how the D is opposed to God in live action in present day. But they successfully managed to rescue Kuma. St. Charlos becomes a pancake, which I called, by the way, like verbatim. I think I said Charlos pancake. I was excited to see it. Well, we saw it. And the chapter then flips back to Imu, and she makes an appearance in front of Cobra and sits on the throne. Peak One Piece continues. I am absolutely praying that this is where we begin in the next chapter, but no guarantee on that front. But yeah, I guess I've expressed myself today. If you disagree with anything that I said here, you know, feel free to discuss it in the comments. If you have your own ideas, you know, just be creative. This is the time for it. Answers are coming soon enough. So remember to like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified to join the squad. Remember to check out my book, The Booms. Volume 1 and 2 is out. 3 is very, very close. Links for that will be in the description as well as pinned in the comments. And if you guys get a chance to read it, I would love for you to leave a review and let other people know how you feel about it. But yeah, you guys already know what it is. Have a wonderful day.